What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Manvir Sandhu. You can check him out at Zennify.com. It's Zennify.com. Before I formally introduce you, Manvir, I always like to point out some other episodes of the podcast people should check out. You know, we were chatting before we hit record about just data, AI, and enterprise, and kind of the cycles that we navigate in business. It made me think of a couple companies. I had the co-founder of Pixar, Alvin Ray Smith on, and you know, when they first started, like they had to kind of wait for the technology to catch up to create these things. It's just interesting, these cycles that people go through. And he had some good Steve Jobs stories, et cetera. Also, Mike Palmer, CEO of Sigma Computing, they do, as you stated, it's kind of Excel on steroids, but they do analysis, business intelligence, accessibility, and other things. So people can check that episode out. They grew from going from 2 million to 100 million in just over 3 years. So it was pretty remarkable, just journey there. So check that out on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect their dream relationships and partnerships. We do that in a few ways. One, we're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution production behind the scenes. Number two, we're an easy button for a company's gifting. So we make gifting and staying top of mind. It could be clients, partners, prospects, staff from a culture perspective. It's simple, easy, affordable. You just give us the list. We do everything else. And it's not, and we're kind of like a one-off gift. We like to send, I think, 3 gifts a year for 4 years or more. So it's just the gift for me that keeps giving to people. And we kind of call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it stress-free for a company to build amazing relationships, because that's the number one thing in my life. One, I've, found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I admire on the podcast. And two, send them sweet treats in the mail. So check out rise25.com to learn more. I'm excited to introduce Manvir Sandhu as the founder and chief innovation officer of Zennify. He leads the firm's data and AI practices and drives digital transformation for leading financial institutions. They're a trusted advisor to CIOs, C-suite executives, and they really specialize in modern data architectures, Gen AI, agentic AI, strategic technology investments across platforms. Think Salesforce, Databricks, Snowflake, and many more. So, Manvir, thanks for joining me.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to just tell people about Zennify and what you do, and I'm going to pull up the site as you do that.
Yeah, so our primary customer base is in financial services. So we work with a lot of regional banks and credit unions, wealth institutions, and insurance institutions. And, it's a great time for those institutions in that the technology is available for them to, drastically improve their businesses. But oftentimes they need assistance with, which technology should they go with? How do they implement them? How do they architect? How do you do change management? So our role is really to help them through those transformations and get the most out of that technology from an outcomes perspective. And so, we're really critical to their strategies, and it's a great space.
I'd love to hear about the evolution of the kind of niche for a second, right? Where'd you start? And, it's a lot. Seems like a very, regulated and complicated type of client, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. It all starts with, in the early stages, you end up sort of navigating and trying different things. We were kind of selling into all walks of life, from small businesses to public sector departments to healthcare to financial services. And the deeper that you go in any one of those industries, there's a set of norms and nuances, and one of those is what you just said is the regulatory environment. So we actually started in the healthcare space, and did some great work there, but just at the size that we were, at that time, trying to scale up to overcome some of the regulatory issues was a little more challenging. We actually found a bit more success in financial services. We had done some great works with some regional banks and some wealth management institutions. And once you have success in an industry and you start to build momentum, you're at a point where you kind of decide, like, hey, do we want to keep doing sort of be all things to all people, or do we want to focus our efforts and really, double down in a space? And that's kind of what we did in financial services. I actually ended up hiring a lot of people from industry. I mean, some of my best people are people that I hired that were bankers, and so they kind of walked the walk.
They brought the expertise also.
Absolutely. So that's been great for our business. And as technology consultants, the ones that can really understand the business and the inside out, not just the technology, but the different motions and processes and what drives profitability, what drives growth, what's going on with interest rates and the macro. The more you can sort of contextualize that in relation to the technology, the more effective you can be, including the regulatory environment, to your point.
What's interesting, if you asked me to predict which one would end up being stronger, obviously I would guess the health and life sciences, because you really started off this company. You want to talk a little bit about how you helped with vaccines early on?
Yeah, it was a very interesting start. We were doing some work with the Clinton Foundation and UNICEF, and we had done some work with them in Africa, in Kenya, and they were pretty impressed with that work, and so they invited us to work on a challenge in Haiti, which was post the earthquake, in 2010, and the challenge was around vaccine spoilage. There was fear that upwards to 60-70% of the medication had been compromised, but they really didn't have data and tools to kind of understand what was going on. And so when we came in, we embraced the challenge. We spent several weeks out in the field, really studying processes, understanding the supply chain, the cold chain, understanding kind of what are some of the root causes. And we kind of landed at a hypothesis. And we felt that technology could be a key part of the solution. And at the time, Salesforce had actually donated free enterprise licenses to the country, which was amazing. And we obviously knew Salesforce, and we're very thrilled about that solution. And so we sort of went to the country and said, hey, we think Salesforce can help you. And they were like, well, what are we going to do with sales technology, right? Like it's a developing world nation. It's not like they're super tech savvy and tech forward. And so they were kind of like, we like you guys a lot, but we don't know if this is going to work, and we definitely can't pay you. And so we were like, okay, well
that's a great combination, man. We know it's going to work, and we can't pay you.
Yeah. We can't pay you. Not right away. So we, at that point, we kind of incorporated and started the company, and we decided, hey, let's take this one on and figure it out. We were really committed at that point. And so we utilized Salesforce, and we had these devices configured, these IoT devices, and the project was called Fridges That Talk. And basically we, installed these devices, configured them, and configured the Salesforce platform as kind of the overall sort of communication management solution, information management solution. And so what would happen is, if a refrigerator went out of temperature compliance, it would trigger a text alert to the local Ministry of Health worker to let them know that, hey, we have a problem in this clinic. And then they had this sort of window to get back and triage and fix the situation, get the fridge back up to the normal temperature. What we learned through several studies and weeks of this is that a lot of the power outages were intermittent, and the power would actually come right back on. And so what they were doing in the current state was saying, oh, the power went out today. We lost, viability of the temperature. So they would throw all the medicine away. Whereas in the new world, they were able to sort of either triage the situation.
It could have been like 30 seconds. that it just came
Exactly.
back on, but they just figured it went out, so that it went bad.
That's right. So that timestamp was really critical. And then just having access to data and analytics across the clinics to understand patterns. So that was a really effective solution. It, was published in a medical journal. It became kind of a standard for how you do this type of work, especially in countries where you've got power issues and, vaccine challenges. And this was during a time of a tuberculosis and cholera breakout. So, it was a very effective time to come in, kind of put us on the map. Salesforce loved the project. They loved the fridges that talk concept, and IoT was big during that time frame. That was like 2011, 2012. And so we were on the big stage at Salesforce, at Dreamforce, speaking about this project, and kind of like that's how Zennify like really got its initial momentum and start. So it's been amazing ever since then.
So you used it for that, basically, like if someone has a conversation or they hit a website, it obviously texts and emails, but you are using that like almost from like a government perspective, like it triggered, okay, let's alert the whoever's going to fix this thing so the vaccines don't go out, which seems like a very unique way to use Salesforce.
Absolutely. And they love that it's being used in that way, and since then they've done a ton of innovations in the healthcare space. And their platform, it plays a big role in terms of how um, providers, either in insurance or in healthcare, can manage patient engagement, and have that all in a secure environment. I think that's one of the values that Salesforce brings, and platforms like Salesforce is the governance, the security, the compliance, to give people the assurances that that data is protected, it's not going to be breached. And that's just incredibly important, especially during the era of AI.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just having the data and then it's protected because most like what you put in place was they actually have data. Before there was not data,
Right.
or very, big picture data, which wasn't as helpful to make actionable decisions. I'm wondering what's the next major milestone client, and what was their use case? Because it may be a lot different from the first one.
Yeah, yeah. I'd say the other big one that came, shortly thereafter was it was a financial institution. And, a lot of these financial institutions, when you think about just basic CRM, and how they engage their customers, there's still, even to this day, there's a significant amount of institutions that use kind of homegrown systems, or they go with a solution that's suboptimal. So, for example, a lot of financial institutions work with like big companies like Fiserv or, you know, um, uh, Jack Henry and some of these other institutions, and they'll sort of say, okay, yeah, like we built this core banking platform or core wealth management platform, and we also have a CRM that sort of goes with it. So we can be your everything, right? And the challenge with that is that like organizations don't necessarily know better, and so it takes a trusted advisor to come in and say, okay, well, let's show you what the experience is like in the way you're doing it today, leveraging those tools versus how it could look in a modern environment. So one of the things we did in Haiti that we leverage and continue to do to this day is the concept of a proof of concept. So when you're a smaller company and you're working with a larger institution, or if you're, Zennify and you're dealing with a country, an entire country like Haiti, and the other side is sort of looking at you and saying, I like you, but I don't know if I fully trust you, or I trust the solution that you're pitching. So one way to mitigate that is to do, rather than like big, expensive projects, very agile, iterative proof of concepts to prove to the client that the technology can actually like work in their environment, and they can see it in action. And so with that financial institution, we took a very similar approach in that we said, okay, well, let us show you, what the tool can do. And in that case, it was Salesforce. And when they actually saw what Salesforce could do for them, compared to what their legacy was, it was like,
What was
you
like a
know,
first, because it's a lot of time and energy for you to do a proof of concept. I mean, it's maybe the
It is.
most time and energy, right? So they want to pay the least. They're the most skeptical at this point, and this is the most amount of work for you. How did you like create this proof of concept so it wouldn't be like, okay, you don't have like weeks and weeks and weeks to like
Yeah.
do a full evaluation because then you have to charge for that. They're like, I'm not even sure if it's going to work. What was one of
Yeah.
those first initial proofs of concept that you can do that didn't like, just suck all of your time and energy?
Yeah, I mean it takes like really good listening in the early stage to hone in on a use case that you feel would be valuable to the organization and something that is demonstrable, right? That you could show. And early on, what we realized with some of the wealth managers is that they were in different environments. Their email solution was over here, and they were, grabbing customer information from like multiple places. And so we just did like a simple integration, connecting a few of the systems together. So all of a sudden they had like a 360-degree view of their customer all on one screen. And when you can show that, and you didn't use smoke and mirrors to do it, you actually were connecting real data within their environment. So it's that combination of listening and finding that, sort of low-hanging fruit, like that we can configure in a, short period of time that is going to have the biggest impact and outcome from the client's perception, right? Perspective.
Yeah,
So
if
it's
they're
not easy.
saying, I'm taking this data over in my email and entering it over here. They're like, oh, you're just listening. Oh, we can connect those things, and that's an immediate. You get an hour back a day or whatever it is
That's
if we
right.
do this. Is it a requirement? And I feel like they have to be using Salesforce for you to work with them, or
Not
no?
necessarily. I mean, it helps if they're familiar with CRM as a concept, and
Yeah.
they've been, maybe they have a version or instance in Salesforce. It's an older version, and you know, and so yeah, it's easier to work in those situations. But at the same time, we definitely work with organizations that are doing it for the first time. It's amazing, like it's 2025 and there's still institutions that are in spreadsheets and using email and have never really had a legitimate CRM. And so we there is still engagements we have where we're like pure greenfield, first time, setting up an environment. And there's more change management that comes with that. And so the projects can be more, involved versus a more mature organization. Absolutely, you can deploy capabilities faster and generally move faster within organizations, get a bit more maturity. Um, but we see kind of both walks of life.
Yeah, no, that was my gonna be my question, which is what I hear is long, complicated sales cycles. And with these, but it sounds like you've kind of gotten around that with just doing a small project as a proof of concept and then basically listening to their needs and doing it from there.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I'll make one comment.
Go ahead.
If I look at let's look at the heyday. I look at the heyday. It's like 2015 to 2000, like 22, maybe a year after COVID. You really saw a boom in, IT spending and organizations, investing in transformation. But in the industry that we focused in financial services, 2022 was a big moment. That's when the interest rates went up, really high, really fast. And so I had three customers that went under, were part of the bankruptcies that happened during that time. We had Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic Bank and, a couple others. And so that was a big impact to our business is having, every one of those institutions. We had major projects going at these institutions and they literally went out of business overnight. Um, and the impact that we saw, even up until today, is that generally there was a pullback, in spending, especially in banking, with the rates as high as they are. Just, lower rate environment creates more lucrative opportunities for those institutions. So what's happened is the decision making, to your point on, getting a deal, even a POC, everything is way more scrutinized. Like people want to see ROI. People want, the CFOs involved in every sort of spending decision. So it's absolutely been, tougher sledding, but at the same time, it makes you that much better as a firm at like figuring out, how to navigate in that environment. So we've kind of had to go these cycles, which has been interesting for us in terms of growth.
Yeah, remember, I think like it's also human nature to not like change, right? So, what are some of the things you learned as far as like change management in working with these companies and because you're like, we need to help make this change. And it also has to be kind of across, yeah, maybe start with one person. I don't know, these organizations are larger that you're working with. So talk about some of the stuff you've learned on the change management front.
Yeah, I think a big paradigm, and especially with AI, by the way, and I know we're going to talk more about AI, but it's the over indexing towards security and risk, and it plays a big role in how fast you can innovate within an institution. So it's not just the change management of the end user where you're trying to get train them on this new capability solution, but it's even the minds of people that are in roles of CIO or CTO that are responsible for the transformation and getting their buy-in in terms of being able to do agile innovation. Just the concept of agile for many of these leaders is kind of a foreign concept, like being able to do things in like iterative 4-week, 6-week cycles. And with AI, by the way, there's no other way to work. That is the way to work, right? Um, and so driving that, mind share shift, even from on-prem to cloud, the concepts and helping people wrap their minds around these things. And, it's a lot of education. It's a lot of, and time investment and with those leaders. Now, when you get through that, and now you're talking about deploying new capabilities for an organization, I mean, what's really key is finding the users in the organization that are kind of your early adopter types. They're your champions and listening to them and having them be part of the what we call the iterative demonstration reveal cycle so that you get like good early feedback on the first release of something that you sort of deploy. Um, and when they've been engaged early on, they feel very vested in the success of the project. And they also become your champion, right? So now that you've deployed, the thing about CRM is what's interesting about CRM in particular is it's great for the company that yes, all our information's in CRM, all the bankers have been entering that in, and it's there. That's helpful to us as the bank because we want that information. Well, is it fully helpful to the banker, who has to like who's out there, pounding the pavement, and in an ideal scenario, it's valuable for both. Like yes, banker, you're also going to get these productivity gains, things that you're spending time on manually, swivel chairing, looking up information. So you have to sort of understand the persona types and the value that they're getting and make sure that you're articulating that value so that everybody's winning and everybody's sort of, a champion for this new innovation or new deployment that you're rolling out. So you just have to be mindful of that, right? As part of your strategy when you're working with a customer. So those are things that we've been doing, that's been very effective.
What are you seeing in AI? And then also after that, what are you doing with companies with AI?
Yeah. So it's a very exciting space, and one of the things that's been a little frustrating for me in my role, is like as a consumer, what I'm doing with AI, whether it's me helping my kids, plan their college activities or, two of my kids are in college. So like, they're using the latest, greatest tools and we're working together and the latest, greatest tools doing like really amazing things, that like we're planning our vacations together, we're doing all these things as a consumers, and they're using it as students. And, and then I think about the work, my financial institution clients, and they're using tools early on that just they're not very effective. And some of the use cases that they're picking are sort of ho-hum, use cases like, oh, summarize this, um, this object in Salesforce, and like that's the big use case that they decided to go after. And then they're wondering why everybody's not getting excited around the room. And I'm like, well, you know, you're not going for it. Like there's some really compelling innovation that you can do, and the technology is really up to par, but you're sort of behind the game here, right? Like you're probably a year and a half behind of where you could be. Um, and so I'm seeing those institutions catch up now, right? Like we're starting to see the pendulum shift. I'm starting to see more adoption, embracing the AI. Earlier, when we talked, you mentioned like Microsoft Copilot, and why is Microsoft Copilot had momentum in financial services early on? It's because CIOs trust Microsoft. Like the Azure platform has like 60% market share in terms of cloud within, financial services. And so they trust the AI that's going to come from Microsoft. Well, early on, and actually even up until right now, Microsoft's AI just hasn't been that compelling, quite frankly, right? And so, some of the early results of those pilots that, clients were doing just, again, weren't that compelling. But now with some of the other tools that we're, bringing to the table, like Salesforce and Agentforce, which is their AI capabilities, and then really powerful products like Databricks that are really critical on the, structured, unstructured data side in terms of, transforming that data and getting it into the environment for AI orchestration. We're actually starting to do some really interesting things with our customers where they're seeing like real gains, real innovation, real productivity. And we're doing as these pilots, and that's probably the central theme of this podcast is doing things in these proof of concept. There's no other way to do AI. You're not going to go from 0 to like 100 with AI. You're going to go through this very iterative cycle, like show it to me, prove it to me. Um, and so, yeah, we're seeing a lot of great progress. Great example is, let's take a commercial banking situation where, part of a lending, when you're loaning to a customer as a bank, you got to collect a bunch of documents, financial statements, um, corporate documents, tax returns. And these are like heavy duty unstructured documents. And so there's a lot of like collection and manual entry, of getting that information into an application like, Salesforce or Encino, which are really important solutions for us in this world. And so with the AI, we've been able to innovate. Let's be able to extract information leveraging OCR, and let's utilize AI to, bring all that information together and, help that banker kind of work through a workflow that, is a lot more efficient leveraging the AI. So that's just one example. There's many examples like this that are really key. One other one I'll mention is, as a seller, one of the things that is really key for me is, just I'm busy. There's information everywhere, and I'm trying to keep track of things and which opportunities are like, should I really go after? Um, and the relationships I have with people, like, I'm on Google, like researching different things about these people. So it's just a lot of different tools I'm using, a lot of information. So one of the big innovations we're doing is something called next best action. And it's really AI and data driven, where, we've basically brought in all the key data, and we're using machine learning. We're using, different advanced tools from like Databricks and Salesforce to basically, like, seller logs in, and now there's a bunch of recommendations. Hey, you need to go talk to this person and talk to them about X, right? Um, and so, it's not that that person couldn't deduce that on their own. It's just the sheer volume of what they're dealing with in terms of information. It's difficult, and you can start drowning in that. So to be able to come in and have a system intelligently organize that for you and leverage AI to make those recommendations, very compelling. So those are the kinds of use cases we're working on that are very exciting.
Yeah, and I want to talk about Manvir too. Like I'm looking through, and people can check out zennify.com/AI to see some of the use cases, because I think is instructive for any industry. Because the stuff you're saying, in the financial services, it's the same in real estate. It's the same in
Yeah.
healthcare. I mean, people are getting data. They need to, input it. They need to store it. They need to have, intelligent insights from it. So it's very similar, I think, across industries. This is interesting. You have a bunch listed here, obviously, of Agent Force Navigator, Data and AI Advisory. Um, but there's a launch-ready assistance built for finance. Talk about some of these. How are people using it, or how are you helping people use it?
So, great example in retail. I noticed you have the retail banking agent. I mean, when you look at the call center data, because institutions have these call centers and, they're taking all these calls and, a lot of the cases are getting logged. And so then obviously, at some point, that gets super expensive and there could be long wait times and there's got to be opportunities for like, well, how do we automate that, how do we innovate? And so one of the things we're able to do is like, let's take all of your previous service case history and have the AI analyze like, well, what's driving these calls at the end of the day? What are the root causes of these calls? And let's have it derive sentiment, let's have it derive the nature root cause of the calls, and based on that let's make some changes. And so in the case of retail banking, we learned that there's a lot of questions coming in around like, which branch should I go into, or what's my balance, or like really sort of basic things that a person could definitely utilize self-service, right, to attain. So in that case, it's really interesting. Not only do we leverage the AI to sort of help identify what those actions should be, but then leveraging like Salesforce Agent Force to build an agent that can then interact with those customers, sort of autonomously with the human in the loop, which is, really key from a governance perspective to make sure that the agent doesn't go bonkers and, say something that gets the bank in trouble. But, that's what's nice is within these environments, there's a lot of governance tools that are built in to protect, our clients from those types of things. So in those cases, what ends up happening is now, what ordinarily would have been a phone call is handled via self-service, and the person that needs the information is getting information very fast. So everybody's winning. The bank's not getting, tied up in phone calls that really aren't value-added phone calls. They're not relationship calls. They're more, addressing things that can be handled. And so these are great examples of how AI is going to help these institutions.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting to see in across any industry how are people using it, because it could be used, use cases across many different industries itself. Remember, I love to hear the evolution of the team, right? You started off, obviously, we talked about with the vaccines, and I noticed obviously you're one of the founders, and you have the position here, right?
Mhm.
Which is Chief Innovation Officer. What did the early team look like? And I'd love to hear kind of how it built from there.
Yeah, early team is very scrappy, very innovative, and I hadn't started a company. All the founders that the three of us had the first time doing all of this stuff, right? And so a lot of trial and tribulation, um, and there's really key people early on in the journey that you bring on that are just instrumental in your growth. Like a couple of people that come to mind is like Philip Paz, our head of technology, just a brilliant technology mind that's been so impactful to our business. We had leaders like Tammy Miller and Callan Mayer, and that have just been amazing at just being leaders in an organization that can build structure, build processes, deal with client engagements and red account situations that you have early on. So the startup team, is scales and you start to like grow and build out, and then now you got to sort of be like, okay, well, we might need someone in finance because this is getting out of hand. I have a financial background, so I was our CFO and our CEO for like several years, right? So like wearing multiple hats. Um, and then as you get to a certain level of scale and complexity, especially as you start to win more like enterprise level clients, um, then you got to start to bring in folks that are maybe at a different level. I wouldn't say that, oh, they're better than the folks you had before. It's not that the case, just they've got more experience working in the enterprise, you know. I'll give you an example, and he hates when I bring his name up, but you know what? He's done amazing work, and so I'm going to give him the kudos. So we have one person that works for us. His name's Sean Murray. He's a great example of like early stage hire that evolved. So he worked at the pizza kitchen across the street from our office in Boise. And one of our other co-founders, Nathan, used to go work at that pizza kitchen, you know, get out of the office and go work and, you know, have lunch there or whatever. And, you know, one of the staff came up to Nathan and was like, hey, there's this guy wants to work for you guys. He's a really good guy. You'll like him. And Nathan was like, okay, cool. You know, like introduce me. And then the guy comes out from the back of the kitchen. He's got this like apron on and, you know, pizza sauce and all stuff. And says like, hey, I really like Salesforce. You know, I think Salesforce is awesome. You know, I want to get some certs. And Nathan was like, well, okay, you know, get some certs, you know, and then we'll talk. And, you know, as a kid, he was very young. He was like 23. He went and he got his certs. And so we hired him, you know, and he started out just like configuring, developing Salesforce for us and with our customers. And he was a rock star. And now he's on like enterprise, like big enterprise clients, like, you know, the Charles Schwabs of the world as an enterprise architect. And this happened in like a 5-year period, right? Of a person going from, you know, like not really in tech, right, at all to just thriving when given the right opportunity. So we have folks like that have really adapted to the enterprise clients. And we have other folks that, you know, they struggled a bit more with it and they're better suited to work maybe with the smaller credit unions. So as we're working with the bigger logos, you know, that are used to working with the Accentures of the world and the Deloittes and the PwCs that have the polish of the slide decks and all that stuff. So like, well, we don't want to be them, but we want to have some of the frameworks and some of the, you know, like successful, these are big, smart organizations. There's some really good things they're doing. So we want to have people that bring in, you know, kind of their level of capability and competency, but into a boutique like experience that we bring to the table, right? And that's what larger institutions are looking for because, you know, if they hire an Accenture and the project goes wrong, you know, they're not going to get fired and they can go back to Accenture and that's got a lot of money and like say, hey, you guys need to fix this. If it's Zennify, you know, and things go south, and you know, then the leaders of that organization look at the person and say, well, why'd you hire a Zennify? What is a Zennify? Like, you know, and so we understand the position they're in. And it is a lot of risk for them. First of all, these projects are risky to begin with. You know, there's a high percentage of these kinds of transformational projects that don't succeed. It's like 68, 70%. That's actually part of the brand name. So what went into the brand name of Zennify was the idea that you can actually go into these engagements and you can actually, you know, feel confident about success, enjoy the experience. It doesn't have to be stressful. It doesn't have to be this like pressure cooker situation, right? Like we can do this and we can do this with a lot of balance, bring calm to the chaos. So that's kind of what the brand name stood for. And with that comes, you know, giving the decision maker the confidence that they're picking the right partner in Zennify, they're picking the right technology, you know what I mean? And like giving them that confidence and security. So, you know, when you think about the team's evolution, a lot of the folks that we brought in recently, you know, this interesting combination of former bankers that, you know, former wealth management people that have been in those shoes, that can speak the language, that really resonate with those decision makers, but then also folks that have been at larger consulting companies, you know, and know how to work in that enterprise environment. And so it's difficult. Otherwise, you kind of have to stay in the SMB space, which is fine too. There's nothing wrong with small, medium business. But if you're trying to go to the bigger customers, you've got to bring some of that rigor. And some of the leaders we've brought in, you know, that at the C level, you know, have that experience.
No, it is really amazing what you've done with the business and also with the team. Talk about the team looks like today. I mean, it started small and scrappy. I mean, to just illustrate what you were just talking about, just take, for example, you know, Chris Conant, the CEO. If you look at his background, it's like incredible with almost 12 years at Salesforce and then even background in at Babson, which is very entrepreneurial. So it kind of takes this like enterprise and entrepreneurial background into what you do. What does a team look like today?
Yeah, so it's an interesting combination of, you've got folks from the Zennify beginnings, like myself, right? That, are part of the core leadership team and driving AI and data, at a time when that's, probably the hottest area to be in. And so, one of the decisions we made is like, well, if we're really going to pivot and not just focus on Salesforce, which was a big part of everything we've done from the beginning, into these new arenas, and we need focus on that. And so, I love the innovation. It's always been something I'm passionate about. And then you've got, people like Chris Conan or Mike Lowe, that came from Salesforce that have been working in the enterprise with these, big enterprise clients that we've talked about for many years. And they actually came from the customer success organization. So one of the things they brought into the way that we work is to focus on outcomes and success, and KPIs. Whereas in the past, we might have been talking about, oh, roll out this new piece of technology and, get these capabilities. And those are great. Those are important. But what's the purpose of those capabilities? Like, what is it going to drive in terms of, the meaningful value or outcomes at the customer level? So you're bringing in, that combination of like that enterprise rigor with some of the startup grit. And then what's interesting about Chris is he is very passionate about AI. Like um, even more than me in some regards, right? And one of the things that he sees as a huge like part of his vision is like, can we get to a 4-day work week? As a firm, and by leveraging AI to like do things more efficiently. I mean, those are bold statements to make, and bold visions to have. And so, a lot of the work I've been doing isn't just the external working with customers, but is actually how do we at Zennify utilize AI to become more efficient? And Chris, came to me and said, "Hey, let's get this done, let's drive this." So like we've been deploying the latest, greatest technologies, even beyond Salesforce and Databricks, looking at OpenAI and Gemini and Claude and N8N and using all these great tools and pulling some of my best architects off of client engagements to go, hey, look, help me architect this stuff so we can be more efficient, right? We could, like reduce certain processes like development or solution design, by 25-30%. And so we've been able to do that, which is awesome. Like, we kicked a lot of that off last year. So now if you look at how we do consulting from beginning to end, it's AI is infused into the whole process, and we're doing things a lot more efficiently. And what's great is we can tell our customers about it. Like we can tell you about things you can do in banking. We can also tell you about what we're doing, that like you can leverage in IT, with your own IT to make all of this more efficient. So a lot of that is Chris's, kind of entrepreneurial, innovative nature. And so that's why this whole thing has worked, quite frankly, right? Is like when you bring in new leadership and you've got the original founder, you could see how that could go south, right? If you don't have the right alignment of, culture. And that's the other thing is really important. Like the firm has always had this awesome culture, and, you've got people like each other, people like their colleagues, and we're like a fun company. We're very open, transparent, and spend a lot of time. I still do to this day, spend a lot of time with like almost every employee. I love that. And so when you bring in the new leaders, are they going to embrace the same values and culture, that you built the company on? It's a big risk when you bring in new leaders. And we merged with another company this year, last year as well. So we brought two firms together within the portco. Same thing, you know, like yeah, sure, when you combine the two firms, the financials look great, but is the leadership going to match? Do we care about the same things? You know? And so what I'm really happy to say is like, these are great people. They're not just like talented leaders, you know, great people that I like, people like, right? And, you know, because of that, we've been able to make this work and go through these changes. But we share a lot of common ground. And I think a lot of that's because they come from Salesforce. Salesforce is a great company. We, you know, share a lot of values similar to what Salesforce does. And so all that stuff's really important, and can get overlooked. But, you know, we put it at the forefront and it's been really impactful for the business.
And your team has grown a lot from the inception, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we're up to, I don't know, 150 people or so. And you know, we've got international expansion happening, you know, so we've got business in Europe now. We've got business in Canada. We actually just hired some folks out of Kenya, which is awesome. We kind of went full circle because one of our first projects we ever did was in Kenya around infant HIV, and now we've got two AI engineers in Kenya that are doing great work. So yeah, it's a, you know, it's really exciting, you know, with the
You know,
expansion.
it's amazing. Manvir, I just want to thank you. Thanks for sharing the journey, the insights. I want to encourage people to check out Zennify.com to learn more. You can check out more episodes of the podcast, and we'll see everyone next time. Manvir, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeremy.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.